thank you for doing this, for taking the time out. I know it's presumably a very hectic time of year.
No problem. No, it is interestingly, this is a little bit of a lull,
Okay.
because
Oh,
at this,
is it kind of like, when you're planning a wedding or expecting a child and you're like, you do loads of stuff and then kind of nothing happens for a while and you're like, should we be doing something?
yeah, there's really nothing else you can do at this point. And so tomorrow I travel, and so this is a good time to kind of get ourselves into the mindset anyway. So, but like I can't order any more equipment. We can't fly anybody else in. So at this point, everything's en route, and we show up and just play the hand we're dealt, or that we have dealt ourselves, I suppose. So.
That's cool. I was curious. So, like my knowledge of you is purely games based. Like, so it's purely around the organization of the games and like helping to put on the annual show, I guess.
Yeah.
But did you own an affiliate first?
I did. Yeah. I started doing CrossFit in 2016 sorry, not 2016, 2006, before the inaugural CrossFit Games. And a few years after that, I took my level 1 course in 2008. And then at the end of that year, I opened my affiliate. So I quit a job in kind of sports technology. And that was 2008 when the world was falling apart. And then we opened CrossFit Southside in Jacksonville, Florida. And I owned it for about 10 years.
Wow. Okay. And how did your involvement with HQ and the games and all that kind of come about?
So it started, I left, so I took my level 1 course, and then over the next couple months, I tried to convince other people to open gyms. And then a best friend's dad told me, you should open a gym. And it was the first time somebody kind of flipped it back on me. And I decided to open the gym because I really wanted to work for CrossFit at that point.
Okay.
But I also realized that there was no way to get into CrossFit other than being a coach. And so there was no like executive entry into what was going on at the time. And so I had a sports career, and I said, hey, I'm going to put that to the side, and I want to learn how to be the best possible coach. And so I had been coached my whole life. I aspired to play professional baseball. So I kind of grew up in a training room. My dad was a horse trainer, so like I just like training and performance always made sense to me. And so I opened the affiliate with the intent that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur and a small business owner. I wanted to work for myself. And so why not learn how to be a great coach, learn how to run a CrossFit gym as a business. And then if things go great, maybe I could work for CrossFit one day, which would be awesome. And if not, I'll lose all my money and go back to grad school, and I'll be an entrepreneur, like everybody else. Like I'll have my first failed attempt and the next one will be better. So when I started working in my affiliate, I quickly joined seminar staff. And then I met Tony Budding and I met Dave Castro as part of the internship process. And so I told them that I had been, I had this job in sports previously. And at that point, that was 2009, 2010 period. And there was a lot of work because they were shifting to the games, leaving Aromas, California and going to Carson. And so I had worked professional tennis, and that was moving into a tennis venue. And so I said I could help. And so I joined the team in 2009, and then in 2010 as a full-time employee of the company.
Okay. Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. So, baseball, so you say you aspired to play baseball. Like, you're obviously pretty good if you were being coached, and you were like, did something happen that stopped it happening, or did you just kind of fall out of love with it?
No, I just got injured. Sports are cruel. And so in high school, I had a terrific baseball coach. His dad had played in the major leagues for the New York Yankees and set home run records. So it was the Roger Maris was the family, and Kevin Maris was our baseball coach. And so I had opportunities to play maybe like small college basketball or to play professional baseball. And I said I wanted to go down that route. And so I had excellent coaches, and I graduated high school and was drafted by the Atlanta Braves. And my intent was to go play for them. And then I tore my hamstring right before the draft. So I actually wasn't able to go. And then the following year, I tore my rotator cuff. So the legs, obviously, as a connected human being, it all is part of the same system. So I tore my rotator cuff. And then at that point was, I've been training a lot and training at a really high level, but that's what, anyways, that's what my experience was. So instead I went back and played a couple of years of college baseball, got my school paid for, and then got out and started working.
Was it hard, like playing college ball, knowing like that you had an opportunity to be at like a much higher level, and then that it just didn't work out? Like, was it hard to pick up a bat or a ball again and not just be like, oh, screw this, like it's not what I should have had?
Yeah, for me, so through high school, my experience was I wanted to be a professional baseball player. And so that was my target, was to become drafted and then to play minor league baseball. And then if things panned out, play in the major leagues. That was what I had hoped to do. And so as a very young person, that was where my focus was. So when I was injured and then played in college, it for me didn't feel very satisfying. And so that I felt like I was very far away. I knew I was not going to play professional baseball because, my age, and then also just where my body was, it wasn't going to pan out. So when I was done playing baseball, it was a sense of relief. I left and I wanted to continue working out, but I never was like I want to go back and play recreational baseball or play softball or something. I was like, I put it away and didn't put my glove back on, except to play catch with my brother, who was playing professional baseball, until my kids were born. And so until like this year, the glove sat in storage until my son, who's now starting Little League, wanted to play catch. So it was a chapter in my life that I loved, and I pursued with, my full focus. And then when it was done, I put it aside and decided I wanted to go work in sports instead.
You can live vicariously through your kids now, though, so that's fine. You can just like pressure them into being really good at it. Yeah, you can be one of those like gymnastics moms or dance moms.
No, it was the opposite. My wife is always appalled that when our kids start sports, she goes, "Well, how they should be so much better. We should be doing more training." And I was like, he's 7 years old. Like this is what a 7-year-old first year playing basketball, baseball, swimming is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
But it was great because I didn't have parents that pushed me in one direction like that. So my dad was a professional horse trainer. He was a world-class horse trainer. So we had several national championships and a big horse farm. And so, but it was neat because that wasn't a conventional way. Like my parents didn't have 9-to-5 jobs. And so they worked for themselves. It was entirely based on how well the horses and their clients did. So I grew up with that as my kind of paradigm for what work and a career was supposed to be like. So sports made a lot of sense. School made a lot of sense. And then for me, I naturally gravitated to working in sports because there was that, everything around here is based on, can you perform or not? And so it felt very natural to leave and go work in sports.
You mentioned tennis. Is that the sport that you started off working in, or because is that just because you're holding something and hitting something? It seemed like it made sense.
No, it was because the company that I worked for. So I worked right out of college. I worked for a small boutique sport marketing agency.
Okay.
After that, I worked for the Jacksonville Jaguars, an NFL football club. And then after that, I worked for about 4.5 years for a sports technology company, and they provided the back-end scoring services for the PGA Tour, the WTA and ATP tennis tours for men and women. They did a lot of work for the NHL and the NBA for all of their scoring and statistical programs. And so my job was to work at the beginning, going out to these events and delivering the services. So I went to a lot of tennis tournaments and I went to a lot of golf tournaments. So that was a big part of my kind of early career was, I would go to, 12 to 15 different golf tournaments a year and probably 5 or 6 different tennis tournaments. So I just kind of grew up early in my career working in those sports, and then also seeing what worked and didn't work, in terms of their tour dynamics. So it was a lot of fun.
And then was there a point then where, so obviously you had aspirations when you discovered CrossFit of like, oh, this is cool, and then I could be involved in the organizational side or like the sports side of it. But was there a point then where it became, okay, I have to go all in on this now and like stop doing the other stuff that I'm doing? This isn't like a volunteering thing anymore or just a helping out thing. This is like an actual career.
So for me, it was a career from day one. And so with the same kind of attitude I had about playing professional baseball. So I started way early with very high expectations for myself. So there was a period where I owned the gym and I was the full-time coach with a very small number of people helping me. I was also on CrossFit seminar staff, and I was also a full-time employee of the CrossFit Games. And so I was at that point the only full-time employee. So Dave and Tony, Dave and Nicole were running the training department. That was their primary focus. Tony Budding was running the media operation for all of CrossFit. That was his main focus. And so I was hired to be in charge of the CrossFit Games and just to kind of keep that project. It wasn't even its own department, but just to keep things kind of on track year over year. And so for me, there was a period where those three things for me were all full-time jobs in a respect. I owned a gym. I was traveling every weekend or, 2 or 3 weekends out of the month and then doing the games work. And so I tried doing that for a while and regretfully, I did it until my son was born. And so about 7 years ago, that was when it was like, hey, something's got to give here. And traveling on the weekends and having a newborn wasn't the way I wanted to show up as a dad and as a husband. And so I had to. So when my son was born, that I came off the road a couple months before that, and then never went back on the road as a flow master. And so that chapter ended, and then a couple of years afterwards, I had already moved to California and was managing the gym remotely, and so ended up selling a controlling interest in the gym to another group. So anyway, that's when we started kind of shedding things. But that was probably 7 to 6 years ago is when this became 100%. It was always my focus and where I wanted to be, but it was just kind of started dropping side hustles, in order to make this all of it.
Do you mourn them? Like, is it gut wrenching saying like, okay, I'm not doing seminar staff, or I'm giving up the thing that I've built from like a warehouse into some, a community or whatever? Like, it can't be easy to just be like cutting ties.
For me, the hardest part was giving up seminar staff, because for anybody who served on that team, you realize it's such a high performing group of people. They care so much about delivering that core message about how to move, how to eat, how to program well, how to teach others, and then the life-changing impact that you can make with that material. It was also fun to go in, and they were all short. So, you go in and it's a 2-day course that's just magical, but it had closure. So you started the course, you ended the course, and then it was done. And that was super satisfying to me, because when you plan, like right now, we're about to be in Madison and execute the CrossFit Games, but we're also planning the 2023 season announcement and all of 2023 and financial planning 3 years out from that, strategic planning 5 years out from that. And so you never feel like you're really wrapped up with anything. Everything's in a perpetual state of motion. But the level 1 courses were like time stood still. Everything mattered. It was evergreen content, and people just loved it. And you felt great being able to serve it to them in a way that they could take it and put it into practice. And then I had my life changed by going to that course. And so it felt kind of full circle to me to be able to give back something that completely transformed my life and transformed my career and, so many things for our family. So that one was tough. That was tough to let go. So I still have all those red shirts in a duffel bag that I'll never get rid of. But also I kind of live vicariously through my friends that are still on seminar staff that are doing it and doing it at a super high level.
Say like you were involved, you became involved with the move to Carson, and then since then there's been like, changes to the games and changes to how it works, as in like we had, say, regionals and like that system, and then we had the national champions and we had that system, and we had like a big field in 2019. Then 2020 was obviously like just like weird. Like there's no point delving too much into like that season, as in structurally, because it was just so odd, like and out of control and stuff. And now we have the system of like semifinals and last chance qualifiers and that kind of stuff. Like with those kind of decisions, are they I was just always curious, was it like one person saying, hey, do you know what we should do? And then everyone kind of going like, okay, and working to get that done? Like say with the move to Madison, was it like, all right, we've outgrown, same way we outgrew Aromas and moved to Carson. Now we've outgrown Carson, we need to move somewhere else? Or was it a case of like, let's spread and move like further into the States? Or, like, and then as changes the season happen, is it similar? Is it like an obvious thing that seems approaching to, say, people within the system, but to all of us outside, it's like, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah. Well, each of those decisions is different. When it comes to changing venues, I think the original, and I wasn't involved with this decision, I was just there as it transitioned. But moving from the ranch in Aromas, California, where we were for the first 3 years of the CrossFit Games, to Carson was largely out of our control. And so at that point, because of permitting for Monterey County, where the games took place. They said, you can't run it here unless you do certain things. And those things weren't possible. And so we had to move the CrossFit Games. And so moving to Carson was more out of necessity. It wasn't on a planning timeline. It was more of a reactive decision. And then as the need was like, hey, we need to move, then it was, well, what are the best options available? And it was try to keep it in California, try to move it to a better venue where we could host more fans. And then that Carson kind of took on, a life of its own. But at the beginning, people forget this, but the CrossFit Games, we didn't fill out the Coliseum or the stadium in Carson the first year. I mean, it was wide open. Maybe a couple thousand people. We ran up and down the seats that should have had people sitting in them, except that there weren't enough people that came that year. But it quickly kind of built its own kind of personality. And so people wanted to come. The test got much larger. And with having a larger campus, that meant that we could test CrossFit and we could test fitness in ways that we hadn't previously. And so the test grew, the spectator experience grew, and then it evolved. When we moved from Carson to Madison, we knew that we had been in Carson for long enough. And in some ways, I think, Dave's perception was we've kind of used all areas of this campus as much as they can be used. We've been to the beach as many times as we need to go to the beach. And so in our final year, it was important to Dave that we also went back to the ranch. So it was our 10th anniversary for that year. And we flew athletes back to the ranch so that they could have, I think we did all the original tests from the inaugural CrossFit Games while they were there. But that was kind of we wanted to hang on to Carson long enough to kind of pay off the ranch in the 10th year and then kind of end on a high note. And at that point, we had already agreed to go to Madison. And so we had started that process about 2 years in advance. And we had scouted out venues all over the United States. And Madison was an event, a place that we didn't actually think would be a successful place. Like none of us had been to Madison. It didn't seem cool. It didn't seem attractive.
Well, they're called like flyover states, aren't they? Isn't that
like
what Americans
right? Yeah. And it's northern in the U.S. and central. So yeah, and it's not a hub for anything.
Yeah.
But it has an unbelievable natural atmosphere. So it's in between two different lakes. So it's cool during the summer, relatively speaking. It also has a lot of natural features. So we've swam in the lakes. They've got trails, Trek bicycles is nearby, and they've been a partner of ours where they supply gear for us. And it just felt like we were tapping into something new. So you had more space. As we plan for the 2024 games, it's the same process where we're usually a couple years out. We'll announce the 2024 host site after the CrossFit Games, likely in September or early October. But it's the same. It's scouting out all these different facilities, seeing what makes sense. And then for us, now the expectation is with each year, the test has grown. So it grew. It was one thing in aromas. It was something different in Carson. It evolved when we were in Madison. And so where do we want to take the test? And then right adjacent to that is what do we want the spectator experience to be? And I think I'm excited about that and the CrossFit Games really meaning something more when we go to our next city, which is that'll be part of the story when we announce it. But it's got me and I think our whole team really fired up.
When you said when we go to our next city, which is, I was like, oh my God, is he going to say what the city is? Is it at the stage now? So if when you were in Carson, you're at the stage where you were able to like run up and down empty seats because like there just wasn't bodies in seats and stuff. And I guess you're having to maybe go to Carson to the tennis stadium and say, oh, we're going to host this event. And they're like, what is it? Whereas now you're kind of at the stage where there's more of an awareness, I guess. Like, are you getting to the stage now where like, is it still a case that CrossFit is going to I'll pick like two hypothetical cities. We'll just say like Miami and Austin. And you're going there and you're saying, can we, like, we are looking for somewhere to host this, blah, blah, blah. Or is it a case that Austin and Miami are coming to CrossFit and saying, we want you to come to us. Here's what we can offer.
It's the latter. And so we run a formal request for proposal process, an RFP process. We had about 70 different cities that were interested. We narrowed that down to about a dozen kind of semifinalists, if you will. We visited 4 or 5 cities. And then what we're doing now is we're actively trying to finalize which of those cities is going to be the perfect fit for us. And a lot of that comes with, financial considerations. The games are really expensive. It's a big event. We use a lot of venues. So we want to make sure that we've got the right partner that makes it worthwhile, but also that can do things for CrossFit and the CrossFit Games that we couldn't do for ourselves. So to bring a whole city to bear, to leave an impact after the game so that there's more of a legacy intact that CrossFit can be a part of. So it's not just a financial back and forth. It's also primarily the number one consideration is this going to be a place that we can continue to evolve the test of fitness? So the CrossFit Games are the top of the mountain. It has to be it's the most tests, the most broad tests, the largest field of athletes at the highest level. And so, how do we make sure that we got the right venues for that? And then after that, like I said, it's the softer things like the community experience, the ability to layer on our media engine on top of that so we can share it far and wide. And then increasingly, our fourth one is going to be, hey, can we really leave an impact? Can we make a difference when we go to this city for this area? And that's going to be an important part of the process for 2024.
So obviously that's going to be a big change, like moving from Madison. And there's been a lot of changes like recently, I suppose. Like we talked about the change to the season where you got semifinals and stuff, and you had the sanctionals prior to that, and you had, there was just kind of, I guess, a tumultuous like 24 months or 36 months where you had new owners. Well, you had to change the system, new owners, another change to the system, and then Dave is gone, and you and Boz are, I guess, like stepping further up from the outside anyway, where it seemed you were previously. Like, how are you able for all that just because of like, okay, well, you just adapt and adjust? Or are there times during that point where you're like, oh my God, can we not just like settle for 6 months and just have no change?
Yeah. I will say, I think we've all got, unfortunately, really thick skin from that, which is we've gone through so much change going back to, well, first, like things changed a lot. I started working here in 2010, and that was, we were in Carson, California. We did not yet have a title sponsor. Reebok would come the next year. We did not have the CrossFit Open. So at that point, all the events around the world were these licensed events that we had very little control of that just sent the top athletes to the CrossFit Games. And then in some cases, they sent athletes to the regionals that would then send them to the CrossFit Games. So the Open was the first major change. Reebok was the first title sponsor, which really unlocked things. And also as a marketing partner, they brought CrossFit as a sport to places that it had not previously been and introduced it to Europe in a dramatic fashion with a giant campaign that the sport of fitness has arrived. And they put the CrossFit Games as an advertiser on television in places that hadn't been before. So that was kind of a wild time. And then we shifted the number of events when we owned and operated the regionals. So we increased the number for a while. We reduced the number after that. And then 2018, 19, 20, it was like, divesting from media, changing the season structure, then COVID, then leadership change. So for me and the team that works here, most of which have been through all of those stages in some way, we have a high tolerance for change, but also I don't think that's the intent. So intentionally kind of changing things just to change them is not the goal going forward. Our hope for this year is that we will be thoughtfully including athletes and event organizers in the planning process with us. And then over the next 3 years, we can announce where we're going. And then everything we do should be consistent and just adding to that as we go. And I think the transition has allowed us to do that. A lot of our planning before then had been on an annual basis. So what does this year look like? Hey, what do we want to do for next year? Are we able to do that? Is the company willing to invest in that? But it was just a shorter process. And, we were growing like crazy with gyms. We were growing like crazy with seminars. And the Games was growing in a really kind of steady fashion. Now I think the positive part about the new ownership has been, hey, let's really be intentional about looking forward a couple of years. And what are the things that we need to unlock in order to see it go down that track? And so that's been really fun and refreshing for me, with this seat starting in January, is to lead that process of thinking forward and then also trying to improve communication with athletes, event organizers, and our partners who I've been in conversation with, but try to make sure that our team is listening methodically. And then the decisions that we make are based on lots of people's collective input. where that hadn't previously been the case, where I think it was, CrossFit did make a lot of those decisions. I think we were making the decisions in a way that we believed were the best things for the sport at the time. So they were not selfish interests. The games has not been a profit center for the company for most of those years. And Greg has been a terrific patron, like allowed the sport to grow, invested a ton of the company's money and his personal money in growing this thing from its nascent stage to where it is now. But now the fun part is going to be recruiting in other voices to the planning process, doing it with them. And then also once it's out, going, hey, we all know what we're supposed to do here. Like CrossFit will produce the test, we'll bring the cameras, the athletes will train and they'll come prepared. But I think there's things that we can all do collectively that would rise the tide for everybody. And that includes affiliates, that includes our partners, that includes, people that don't do CrossFit right now, that might find it because they watch it on television, they see an athlete's social media account, and then all of those things end up hopefully walking them through the doors of a CrossFit gym so that they can start their own journey. So,
I spoke to Boz like about a week and a half ago, and we talked about like Dave getting fired, and that it was like from the outside looking in, it was like left of field, and it was like a shock, I guess, because it's like someone who's so synonymous with something suddenly being gone. You're kind of like, no, that's obviously a typo or a joke or something. For you guys on the inside, like, is there? I guess was there a point when that happened? Was there a point of like, oh, maybe I should go as well? Is there like loyalty? Like, should I be loyal here and leave, or should I be loyal to the company that I'm like? Should I be loyal to my role, or should I be loyal to the person that I've been working with? And then is there also a thing of like, oh, geez, am I next? Like, is nobody safe? Like, because he was like again from the outside, the safest person there is gone. So then is everyone like scrambling a bit, being like, oh shit, what if I'm next?
I mean, I can only speak from my experience on that one. I'm sure Boz shared his. Yeah, it was a big surprise, and I knew earlier than I wanted to. And I think for me personally, it was really difficult because Dave's a person that I've worked for and with for a really long period of time, and I think you're right that Dave is synonymous with a lot of things. He's been one of the most kind of public figureheads for the company. And I think in some ways it's almost a mischaracterization of him too, because in some ways he has a big public persona. And in many other ways, I think there's things that he's contributed that are very different from that. So he was one of the original driving forces behind the seminar department. And that is such a high performing team. So how they operate, the number of seminars that go on every weekend, the high degree of kind of consistency and professionalism that's delivered there. Dave was involved with that from the very beginning, and I think he deserves a ton of credit for that. Same way with the CrossFit Games. So for such a long period of time, he was a driving force in terms of like getting things done. And in the early years, just like with seminar staff, those were really rocky years. It was like you're creating something that has never existed before. So there's no playbook for this. You're leading when there's a lot of criticism, and there's it takes a really strong leader to be able to get through some of those stages. So you're right when people say, somebody that's synonymous with the brand in that way to be departed, that's a big change for everybody, and it's a big surprise. But in terms of like my personal fear and things like that, I didn't have that same sense. I had a strong sense of, I really want to continue to do things the right way. And for all of us, my first loyalty was to the mission that we're on. And so I feel really strong. Like I left my day job, I was making good money in a previous career to go open a CrossFit gym and to be an unpaid intern on CrossFit seminar staff. Not because I wanted to just like be like Greg. It was because I really believed in what Greg was saying, is that you could train people, make a difference in their lives, get paid for that like a professional, and that would be deeply satisfying. And for me, I was like, that's all I needed to hear. I was like, I'm loyal to that. I'm loyal to that direction. And so, and I've had a terrific opportunity. Like Dave's been one, Tony Budding before him was another. I've benefited from a lot of these unbelievable characters that have done things at such kind of crazy and like monumental times. But so for me, it's really trying to continue that and honor that. So like they've built something really strong. We want to continue for it to grow. We want it to be better than it has been, like to continue to raise the bar. But also we want to carry and preserve some of those kind of touchstones from our past that are super central. Like, we're not just trying to be some other sport off the shelf that looks like fill in the blank sport. There's not a business model from pickleball or, major soccer or something like that we can put in our sport into. So I think those are the ways that, for me, I didn't feel unsafe with that, or like, hey, is this next? It was really first take care of the team, make sure that we're stable and we have space to operate. And then after that, let's make sure that we get this on the right track so that we're not having another year of swirl that our community is going to have to go through with us. Like, let's make this the year that we internally execute at a high level and plan for the future so that we have more consistency and glide, as we move out. So anyway, that was my experience, at least.
You mentioned there the swirling notion, I guess, for the community looking at the season and stuff. And like, we've talked about the changes. Is it different? Like, were you taken by surprise by anything when you stepped up? Because as you mentioned, when Dave was the figurehead, a lot of the shit that was thrown landed on him. And like, that was like part of his role, I guess, was to just be the shock absorber for everyone, that it just was directed at him. And then he was able to just say, yeah, fine, say whatever you want, I don't care. But then when you're stepping up into that role, and when Boz is stepping up like further, and your head is coming up above like, the level of everyone else, have you been taken by surprise by, I guess, the level of criticism or the volume of criticism? Or is this something that you had seen when it was directed at Dave? Or do you, like, when he was gone, were you like, okay, we're in for a lot here because it's different and people don't like change?
Well, I think Dave was much more than just a figurehead. I think that's really important to clarify. But one of the roles he played was to be that public figure. And so in some ways, he would be a scapegoat for negative things that happened. And in some cases, he would be the one person that got credit for all the things that the team did. And having been around Dave for a long time, that was never how Dave conducted himself personally. So I think while other people would want to load praise or criticism on one person, Dave was usually pretty fast to say, hey, there's a big team that's involved here. And so he was a terrific team player when it came to some of that stuff. But in terms of like taking on a new role, yeah, it's different. I think for me, it's different also because it's not important for me to maintain a large public profile. And I think that Dave doing that served a role for the sport going forward. And for me, that's not a high thing on my priority list. I want the athletes to step forward. I want to empower other people in our team to be more forward. And I think Boz is a great example of that. Boz is a character from our community. San Francisco CrossFit, he's an OG, one of the original flow masters. He served in a lot of different ways inside CrossFit and outside in this community. And so people like him deserve a little extra recognition, and surfacing him as part of the team that is leading the sport forward, I think is terrific. We've also got other people, like new people on our team, like Heather Lawrence, who left a tenured career at the best sport management program in the whole world to come join CrossFit to help grow our sport. And so she's a terrific, strong leader inside our company right now. And I'm happy to see her getting more kind of time and attention, particularly as we build out more process. We are onboarding all these new athlete committees so that they can be part of the planning process with us. And those are things that I couldn't have done on my own, or no one on our team was equipped to do, but she is. And she's done this before. She's been all over the world as a consultant for other giant international sports properties. She's on international federations and boards and stuff like that too. So she's just a super asset. And so I think that's a positive thing for people to see, that there's not just one person for better or worse, that there's a team of people who are full-time that want to see the sport go forward and to see the entire company and our affiliates and our trainers go forward as well. So I think that's been, hopefully kind of a positive side. So I think we're spreading the ball a little bit in that regard. And then also I think it's a different era where I'm looking forward to more athletes stepping up into that figurehead role and being really strong representatives for things going forward. And that has been the case previously. I think Rich Froning and Annie Thorsdottir are some of the original examples of that, where they were terrific spokespeople. Both of them were on CrossFit seminar staff. Each of them has thriving affiliates. And so you start seeing that people that have all those different understandings of, you know, different facets of the community, they tend to be some of the best spokespeople. So we want to continue to tap into that and look for some of the new voices from the younger athlete generation also.
Is there ever like, 'cause obviously things are changing where you mentioned Rich and Annie, and you know, like there's other athletes who are coaches and then they become athletes and they compete, or they're athletes and they coach to supplement their lifestyle as an athlete or whatever. And now you have this kind of dawn, because as the sport becomes bigger and more lucrative and more professionalized, you also have people who are like, I'm going to be, they're like 12 and they're like, I'm going to be a CrossFit athlete. And you have these people who are, you know, like say Justin Medeiros, he's like current champion, you know, he's vying for it again this year. He like doesn't own an affiliate, doesn't, and I'm sure he's a valuable part of the both communities that are like that he trains at and that he lives near. Um, but like you have these people who are entering the sport as athletes. Is there ever like um is there ever like a drive to say like, hey, can you guys maybe talk up affiliates a bit, or can you guys say how important it is to be part of a community? And because you see people like, you know, like Matt, who trained in his basement for whatever 4 years, you know, like
Yeah.
that kind of isolated training, just I'm an athlete. Like is there ever a thing from your guys' side to be like, you know, maybe in the next interview you could maybe mention affiliates?
I mean, it's important for me that we don't put words in athletes' mouths. And I think that's something that CrossFit's never been like, hey, you know what? Let me try to tell you to do something that you don't want to do. Like, if you want to do it, awesome. And that we are always looking for ways that we can showcase people that really get it, you know, the totality of what it means and what CrossFit has to offer the world. And it was interesting because I hear a lot from athletes as we're doing kind of our listening tours and working with them is, you know, increasing professional opportunities is really important to athletes. And what they're saying is, I'd like to be able to train full time and have an income from that. And, you know, for people who have been around as long as I have, the original earning opportunity was, hey, maybe if you made it to the CrossFit Games, you would have a little extra recognition, and that would help you if you wanted to open an affiliate. And you could train other people. And there's many people who have seen that. That was their first earning opportunity. And that would be like guys like Chris Spieler. I take that back. He may have owned a gym first before he became a games athlete, but his status as an athlete has helped his gym and some of his other ancillary businesses. The same thing with Jason Kalipa or Stacy Tovar or, you know, others. So I think making sure that they're aware of that opportunity is really important to me, but also it should be an attractive opportunity for them. So it shouldn't be you know, what you ought to do is, you're doing me a favor when you say this. It's what you're really doing is creating more appetite for CrossFit. And if you're a beneficiary of that, that's awesome. That's your slice of the pie. Your affiliate and your, you know, your businesses that come out of that, that's yours and you've earned it, but it could be amplified by, you know, the fact that you're an athlete. And also this notion that, you know, every stage, like it's easy to kind of look at one athlete and assume that they're the archetype for all these athletes. It's never been the case. Like when you sit down and you talk to people, everybody's at a different stage. And so where Matt was hyper-focused as an athlete in competing and bettering himself to win the CrossFit Games, he is a savage competitor. One of the best that's ever lived in our sport in terms of his commitment and dedication and his gamesmanship to win. He is extraordinary. And that required a level of commitment that, you know, he trained by himself. And that was what worked for him to go win gold medals. Now you see him at a different stage in his career where I think he is coaching other athletes. He's more interested in others and their success. He has his own business interests. So he's at a different stage of his life. And by the way, the cool thing about CrossFit is you can do this for a really long time. Not as an athlete at the top level, but you can be a coach forever. And the Justin Medeiros one is a great example. Like I have no idea what Justin's aspirations are, but I've had dinner with Saxon Panchik, and it struck me to him where he is also a young athlete on the rise in the men's side. And he has had the experience of watching his dad open multiple CrossFit locations, you know, starting in like church basements and a couple other places. His brother, Scott, and his other brothers have owned CrossFit gyms. So for him, he naturally gets that, yeah, I'm going to compete hard as an athlete for a while, but he knows for the rest of his life, he knows how to earn an income. I'll open a gym. I know what that looks like. I know how to coach people and add value and deliver results. So he's set. like as an entrepreneur and a self kind of, he has a strong degree of like control and self-agency on where he wants his career to go. And so he can commit himself as an athlete right now. But he knows that when his athletic career is done, he'll still have a coaching career, and there might be other things available to him after that. So, so anyway, I think what's neat about our sport is like there really are multiple ways for people to commit themselves to this full time. And so like, and that was me, like I left a job and I was like, as soon as somebody told me you could get paid like a professional and you could coach, I was like, all right, now you've got my interest. And it's, opened up a terrific career path for me. So it's and for people on my team as well.
If we look at the season then, so like there's obviously there's a lot to cover, and I know we're kind of tightish on time. Like we'll say if we look at like the open, quarterfinals, and semifinals, it seems to me that this year is like the start. First of all, I guess it appears like it's the start of a settled period. Like that, I've heard you talk and I've heard Boz talk about the importance of like people need to know what's coming, and they need to, like, event organizers and athletes and gym owners and like people organizing affiliates for the open and stuff, they need to know like, all right, this is it and this is it, not like, yeah, we'll talk about it again in October or whatever. Like that it's going to be fairly settled, so we can kind of accept that this is the start of, I guess, a new era. But it also came with like a lot of criticism, and I guess part of me is like, okay, that was always going to happen because there's change, and like Dave is gone. And then, when Boz was on, he was talking about people's short memories, that like there was a lot of fuck ups when Dave was in charge, and people are just like, well, this wouldn't have happened when Dave was around. And, he was kind of pointing to the fact that like the exact same thing actually did happen in 2000 and whatever. But it like, is it irksome when that's happening, when you're hearing like, podcasts or vlogs or media outlets or whatever saying like, oh, this isn't good enough and this needs to change? Or, like say the glaring examples that we don't have to get into the minutia of the decision-making or what happened, but like the Oslo, the implementation or the carrying out of the rules on Oslo got ruffled a lot of feathers and people got kind of pissed off about it. And then I guess like the workout, the score submissions and the score kind of issues around quarterfinals, a lot of people got pissed off about that. Like, is it kind of irksome when you hear the criticism? Do you like listen to it? Like, do you ignore it? Do you accept that it's part and parcel of a growing sport, that there's going to be that kind of criticism? Or is it like a thing of, like king for a day, that just stops?
Well, it doesn't just stop. I'll say is I kind of bucket the feedback into different areas. And I think one of the historic problems that we've had is that the only way to communicate with CrossFit was through anonymous emails or by taking your case to social media. And I think we built some really bad habits from 2018 until recently with some of that. And, there was all kinds of things, the company transition, there's been a lot of reasons where people would think, and I don't have any other avenue. So my last recourse would be to complain about this in a public forum, but that's the only thing available to me. And it's been really important to our team that we want to stop that, is that we want to have more ways for people to communicate, especially with our team. So, and we want more ways for athletes to communicate with us and more ways that we can communicate with athletes in ways that there's an open dialogue going in both directions. And so those, like the evidence of those things getting better is we've hired a full-time communications manager who will be responsible for sharing out details to athletes on where to be, when, how to play our sport, eligibility rules, but just make sure that they're constantly informed about the season, the format, the process, the rules, the results of not following the rules and those kind of things. We've implemented the Hopper, which is new for this year, which is a periodic email that will go out to athletes. We've introduced these new divisional committees so that teenagers can talk to us, masters can talk to us, so they don't just have to communicate exclusively through a Facebook group or through social media and then say, hey, I hope if we complain loud enough, we'll be heard. You can be heard right now. We're talking to athletes themselves, their representatives as a different group, the coaches for many of the largest training camps as well. So we're trying to make sure that we're building bridges into those communities so that we have dialogue. So I think for people to be frustrated, that's fair play. And to share constructive dialogue and like, stop doing this, do this instead. Where I don't spend a lot of time and energy is, and I just don't have it, is, talking about criticisms of our media, for example. It's like, hey, we have a full-time media team. We take that feedback on our commentators or the quality of our feeds and stuff like that. But, to a large extent, I don't feel like those are people who are trying to build our sport and take it to another level. It's not the athletes themselves. It's not their coaches and things. When we get feedback from athletes and coaches, we take it and we try to act on that. The other is criticism of judges and kind of like the consistency and fairness. For me, I'm always talking to and listening to athletes. Like, that's the group of people in the room that I have the most attention towards. And so I think some cases, volunteers and people who are doing a great job get criticized unfairly, but it's sort of a foreign concept for me. Like, I've been doing this for a long time, since 2006. I feel like I've been part of this community, and this notion that we would, that there would be other entities that call people in our community victims and advocate on their behalf is just kind of new to me. We have a community of 12,500 entrepreneurs, 150,000 coaches around the world that teach CrossFit. All these small business owners who have, success in our ecosystem, and the hundreds of thousands of athletes that register and play our sport. But it's always strange for me when people, if they don't follow the rules, or CrossFit's victimizing this athlete, CrossFit is doing something to them. All our team is focused on doing is creating the best possible experience with what we have available to us. And we have full-time people who commit their lives to this. I've been doing this for 12 years. Most people on my team are like 6 to 8 years at least. And so I think those are the parts that are, sometimes a little bit more difficult to swallow, because it doesn't feel constructive. It just feels like, hey, there's a problem, and let's just exclusively focus on the problem without focusing on, well, where do you actually want to see this go? And I think, like I said, I think we've all kind of built ourselves some patterns of communication that we need to change. And I think that the divisional committees, our direct communication with athletes, their agents and their coaches, the same happening with the event organizers, like bringing them into the fold so that they're not just having to react to what CrossFit does, but instead taking their feedback, trying to structure this in a way that is successful for them at the same time. That's the process that I think we want to have going forward. And so there will always be room for criticism online. I think that's kind of healthy, but I don't think it should be the exclusive way that people feel like they need to talk to us.
You mentioned semifinals there, and I guess I was curious about the future of that and what it might look like. And obviously, you're probably going to just say like, "Oh, I can't divulge too much," but like, I guess is that something that we're going to see long term? I guess first of all, the semifinals, like say, like the examples of like Strength and Depth and Lowlands and Torian and those kind of examples, and will it maintain like as we stand now, where it's like CrossFit will maybe program 2 workouts and the rest of it you're like, create, like, show us what you can do? Is that the format we're likely to see, or do you think it will become more standardized?
Oh, I can't divulge too much. No, I tried to be. No, I think what we like a lot is we like the 4-stage season. We like the time of year that it takes place. When it comes to how much programming control CrossFit will have, that's an open subject. Our team's discussing that. What I do think this year has shown us is that what people have told us is they want CrossFit to take more of a direct role in that, and we've heard that. We also want to see these events become successful. One of the biggest challenges that we have as a sport is that a lot of these events on their own struggle, and I think this year's format in some cases made them struggle more than in previous years. In previous years, I'll specifically reference sanctionals, when there were 30 some odd events, and the winner of each of those events got to go to the CrossFit Games. There were positive parts of that, and there were a lot of negative parts of that. It was a very long season. It was confusing for athletes. It was easy for athletes to maybe try to go to the furthest and most remote one to win a spot where the strength of field was low. And it was difficult for people who wanted to go to the larger events that were more popular. So I think we need to lift certain elements of that, which is I want those events to be successful, and we would like to meaningfully tie them into the season in the future. And whether that's 2023 or 24 or 25, we need to stage that in a way where it's moving in the right direction. But I do see a future where those events have impact on the overall sports season more than they do today.
Okay.
At the same time, we want to take some of the best parts of regionals, which were, it was simple. It was easy for fans to understand. Athletes had a very consistent experience. There were lots of in-person competitions or experiences for those athletes. Like in-person competition is just better than virtual for many reasons. It's easier for our team to execute. It's difficult to run as many virtual competitions as we did this year. And I think there were mistakes made. There's things that we would do better in the future. And a lot of those are because we ran so many and they were in such a compressed window of time. It's just difficult. And I think we need to do less virtual competitions going forward. And the ones that we do, will do better. And some of that is anytime we do something a second time, like we do take that feedback really seriously. There's a team here that cares about improving that process, making a test that people are confident in and that they really want to take. So we'll do that better in the future, but we really want to preserve the in-person experience as much as possible. So I think we'll look at how we can both give the athletes a more consistent experience, exercise control where it's helpful, but also try to add value to other events that are either not part of the semifinals process or that might be part of the semifinal process and really kind of master that relationship. And the things that we learned this year was it was a hybrid and it left a lot of things exposed. And those will not be the problems that we have for next year. Like those will be solved. I feel very confident about that. Now, what that exactly looks like, that will be the subject of, what we talk about in October when we announce the 2023 season.
So is it like, again, like tell me to piss off, but is those we'll say like the off-season events, like the ones that aren't like semi-final events, would it be a case of, I'm trying to remember the name of that thing, like there's an athletics competition that's not to do, it's like out of season of the Olympics, and it's like, is it like the Grand Prix or something they call it, or I can't remember, where they host these events and it's like you can win money at it, and like it's kind of part of the season but not part of the season. Is that the type of thing that you're talking about?
Sort of. I mean, the framework that I use frequently is golf. So golf has kind of their main point season, and then they have other events that are after the end of the tour championship. That there are some other events that people play also, and it's great for developmental opportunities. In some cases, the top athletes will also play in those to earn more money. In other cases, athletes that didn't make it to the finals or to the tour championships can play in those to continue to earn points for their next season, and the points matter. So I do think that there's a lot that system has to offer and that might apply into what we're thinking about. But I think what's important about this is like really the games is a narrow section of what's happening overall in sport. So there are hundreds or thousands of events that take place around the world right now. I think the pro aspect is very important to me, but also I think it's important to grow this at all levels and to have more of a developmental middle portion of that pyramid that people want to go and play. And I do think I also want to, while we're trying to grow the professional experience for a small number of athletes, we also want to grow just the competitive experience for ordinary people. People around the world are proud of competing in an Ironman triathlon, or they would spend their own money to go play a famous golf course because it's prestige and it's difficult, and they want to test themselves in that way. I think we should celebrate that more often. I think too many times we say you're either a pro or you're not. And if you're not, you're either a victim, you're exploited, you don't make enough money. Most of those people are unbelievably fit, and they do it because they love it. It's a sport that they have adopted. It gives them all these incredible opportunities in their life that are largely not financial. They can hike, they can do it. Any friend of yours that says you want to go do something, you can say yes to. like that's what they're enjoying. And I want to create better experiences for those people, because I think that's the part where that's growing the kind of the overall sport. So, at all levels, not just the pros, but people who are really competitive and they identify as an athlete in this sport and they want to go play. But they want to play like a Ironman triathlete or a scratch golfer or a competitive tennis player. And they're like, I want to get out there. This is my sport. I want to play it well at the highest level. But I don't need this to be like my investment account. This is not my pension for the rest of my life as I'm set. That is for all athletes in all sports, a very small percentage of the people that play. And so like for me, I play baseball and like I wanted that to be true. I also realized how difficult that is, that as the pyramid goes up, it becomes extraordinarily competitive and it's not available to everybody. But there's lots of people that can play our sport, that can play CrossFit. They can play this with their friends at a local gym without even leaving. You know, I race people at the 5:30 a.m. class, and they usually beat me. but like I can have fun with that. I can do a local competition, and that's fun because it adds extra excitement and it gives me a focus to my training. Or I can go travel somewhere else and pay for a hotel room and a flight and do that. It's great
That
those
was
opportunities
that
are
was
there.
a specific person. There's a specific person came into your head because you said I race people and they like there was
Yeah.
you clearly have one person that you always race. You're like, God damn it, Brenda, why do you always
No,
say
yeah, I joke, but there are, and I think
yeah.
that's the fun part, which is whether they're a partner in a workout and you're doing it together, or they're just pushing you to
Yeah.
get the intensity up. That's where the results come from. Like that's the magic of what we do. Is sport drives more results. So anyway, I think I want to do both of those things: the pro side going up, and then also the kind of competitive middle of the pyramid, and also a developmental stage for athletes. I think is really important, but not in the sense of like, these are the pros and these are the
Amateurs or whatever.
poor others, the poor amateurs that have not yet made pro level. Be like, no, these guys are all gladiators. Like they're all doing it. And we should celebrate that. But we should celebrate the games athletes and the professionals in a different way. And we should celebrate those that are competing at local or continental level competitions around the world in a different way.
So the game's then kicking off like today, when this comes out. Is it like, do you feel like a freer run of like, there isn't as much pressure because there's been change and because things are new? Or do you feel like there's more pressure to perform because there's been change and because now it's like, if this goes badly, people are going to say, oh, well, obviously, because it's new people in charge? Or does that give you more freedom to be like, oh, like obviously you don't want to make mistakes, so you don't want things to go like to wobble or whatever. You want everything to be absolutely perfect, and they're the systems that are set in place. But do you feel like more pressure or less pressure because it's different than it was before?
It is different. I couldn't say if it's more or less because, for our team every year, the games are a tremendous amount of pressure and we love it. This is what every single person on this team signs up to. What I'll say is it's different. The people that I feel pressure to perform for are primarily the redshirt level 1 trainers that are delivering this content week in and week out and making sure that the test of fitness is something that they can talk about when they're doing 20 seminars next weekend around the world, that this is in line with the CrossFit methodology. It is a varied test. It is different than what we've done previously, but it is in line with the methodology. They're the ones, like those have been my brothers and sisters, like when I taught the course, that I'm like, hey, that's the one, like you want to make sure that they're like, hey, that was good. The other side is the athletes themselves. We have 442 athletes that are going to be with us at the games. Each of them has a coach, and we want their experience to be something that on the other side, like we are programming a test that I want the trainers to be proud of. And I also want to create an experience and a stage that the athletes and their coaches are proud of. So that they can be like I said, the gladiators of our sport. So they have the toughest test. Like no human being takes a physical test that is more broad or more intense than these athletes. Like that should be celebrated. And so I want the claim to be high. I want the test to be really high. And then I also want the athletes to be the heroes that get to go through, and then someone will win. All of them will receive a rank order. And I want them to all leave and feel proud of what they were able to perform. And then what I want is for the fans to be able to watch what's happening and use that as a little extra energy when they go back to the gym on Monday morning after the CrossFit Games, and let that inspire their training or give them a future goal or walk them into a gym for the first time. If they're just watching this on television in France or in Ecuador or wherever it is, when they're going to see this, and we're going to share this far and wide, we want them to say, hey, this is not just awesome and inspiring, but also this is accessible. And the way you play this sport is you find a coach, the place with the best coaches in the world are CrossFit affiliates. And so walk them directly through the doors of a gym and say, hey, if you want to learn how to play this sport, this is where the instructors are. This is where the community is. This is where you can be part of this community. So that's the hope. So from a pressure standpoint, it's not, hey, I wonder if I screw it up, or I wonder if the team's going to screw it up. I have a really high confidence in this team. I have really high confidence in, we have also 781 volunteers that will be there with us, about 70 kind of team leaders. So I have supreme confidence in Boz and Johnny Mack and Heather and Joe Novello, who runs our broadcast operation, Jonathan Haynes and Emily, who run our social and publishing. And then, 150 people at CrossFit that are all they're all doing something to make this thing come together. So anyway, I feel really good about it going in. There's a ton of pressure to perform, but it's the right kind of pressure. And I think that's, a healthy part of sport.
Do you think it will feel different hearing whatever stand by before the first workout this year compared to other years?
Yeah. And I think every year before it has felt different. This year will feel different for me because it's really important for me that there's more people on the team that get to step up. And so I've been asked to step up, and I'm thrilled with it, and I'm honored. And I want that same experience for people that are on the team with me, that they feel like they're empowered to go do their best work, whether that's Boz, or if it's a volunteer in the media pits, or if it's a judge. I want everybody to feel like they've got more control in the outcome than they feel like they've had previously. Because if we do that well, and we do that across a bunch of different groups, I think we're going to be really well positioned to grow the sport.
Have you got a favorite event that you're looking forward to out of all of them? Obviously, you don't have to tell me what the event is, but number whatever on Saturday.
I get fired up when Boz gets fired up. Saturday is going to be really exciting. There's a lot of great stuff that's happening on Saturday. I'm excited about the whole Wednesday that we have. I'm excited about Thursday when the age groups kick off, because the age group programming, I think, is stellar this year and has been more thoroughly vetted than previously. I got a lot of good stuff. I'm also really excited that the way we're going to conclude the event, the final event on Sunday, which will be broadcast live on CBS in the United States and will be streamed all over the world, is a really good capstone to the week. And I also like that it's going to piss certain people off, and it's also going to be an awesome CrossFit test. So it's going to be a really fun, experience. And also, the athletes that will be going up against it are going to make it special. That's what is going to make the test even more incredible.
Cool. Well, look, thank you. I've just looked at the time and I've kept you way longer than I said I would. But thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. It was great meeting you in London. I look forward to meeting you again. And yeah, I'm really excited for the next 4 days or whatever, and then beyond. I'm excited to see how the season changes and where you guys end up, and what city we're trying to price flights to next year is exciting. Obviously, Boz broke my heart last week, and I was like, what about Europe? And he was like, no, not in the next few years. I was just like, God, you could have left me some kind of hope. But yeah, maybe someday. But thanks for coming on, and best of luck. I hope everything goes seamlessly well, and I hope there's no room for criticism or anything. I just hope everything is as you want it.
Awesome. And a little better. Thank you.